You want to write a fantasy novel. Of course you do. That's why you clicked on this video. You have the dream of becoming a fantasy author, but you've no idea where to begin. From the outside, writing looks simple. Open a blank document, start typing. But for new writers, that blank page isn't freedom. It's paralysis. Today, I'm going to show you how to break that cycle by building the habits that give you the time, structure, and momentum to write. I'm James, a fantasy author, editor, and the owner of The Arcanist, an independent publisher dedicated to sharing excellent fantasy fiction. For the past 6 years, I've made it my mission to become the best writer that I can. And for the past 2 years, I've dedicated much of my free time to helping emerging fantasy authors find their voice. My debut novel, Ashen Rider, released last month in December of 2025. And I have 5 more books scheduled for release over the next 2 years. None of this happened on a whim. These rapid releases are the result of years spent learning the craft, practicing deliberately, and refining my process. Through trial and error, I've developed a system of skills, habits, and disciplines that transformed me from an unpublished hobbyist into a working professional novelist. Over the next 4 weeks, I'm going to show you how to turn your writing ambitions into something real. But I'm not going to sell you comfort. There are no hacks, no shortcuts, and AI will not do it for you. If you want to be a writer in the new year, you have to live like one. Prioritizing the work, accepting trade-offs, and letting go of the version of your life that leaves no room for writing. Are you ready? Okay, let's begin. There are 4 disciplines you must master if you want to go from writing nothing to writing entire books. First, you learn to work. Then you learn how to read, critically and with intention. Once you know how to read, you will learn how to write. And finally, you will learn how to publish what you've created. This video focuses on the first discipline, building an ironclad work ethic, which is the foundation that will support your entire writing career. It's the kind of unglamorous, old-fashioned discipline that most people dismiss, but it works. Now, I am a fantasy author, and this whole series is tailored towards the fantasy writer, but this video is for everybody. You don't need to write fantasy to benefit from what I have to say, so stick around. The biggest limiting factor for most aspiring writers is time. We wait for the perfect stretch of freedom, no obligations, no interruptions, before we even consider starting. But here's the hard truth about time. You won't use it unless you've already built the work ethic to support it. In my early 20s, when I returned to college to finish my degree, I had nothing but time. I lived with my dad, I worked very little, and after moving to a new state, I had no real social ties. And despite all that free time, sitting down to work on my writing was still a struggle. Now, I'm in my late 20s. I have my own place, I'm building a life with my soon-to-be wife, and I'm working a job that has turned out to be a long-term career. I have less free time than ever. Yet, 2025 was my most productive writing year to date. So what changed? The work ethic. Here are the 3 ways I deliberately made time and used it to build real discipline as a writer. Step 1, wake up early. This is the hardest change I'll recommend across the entire series, and it's usually the one that makes people look at me like I've lost my mind. Waking up early offers psychological and physical benefits that staying up late simply doesn't. Research consistently shows that earlier sleep schedules are associated with higher serotonin levels and lower cortisol, which reduces stress and the risk of depression and anxiety, all of which are creative killers. Early risers also tend to exhibit higher cognitive performance. When your circadian rhythm is aligned with an early schedule, your brain reaches peak performance earlier in the day, when you're actually awake to use it. Waking early also makes every other good habit easier. Morning exercise, meal prep, getting to work on time without stress, and most importantly, writing. When you finish your daily writing before breakfast, the work is already done. You're no longer carrying that mental weight around all day. And if you write more than planned, you're no longer just keeping up, you're getting ahead. I usually wake up between 3:30 and 4:30 a.m. Not always, but Even when I do sleep in, I still wake naturally around 5 or 6. That gives me uninterrupted time to write, and space to maintain other good habits that support my creative life, and honestly my life in general. It also means that I'm usually asleep by 8 or 9, and when I stay up past 10, I almost always pay for it the next morning. But this habit is the single most important enabler of my writing career. That said, you don't need to be that extreme. Start small. Set your alarm 30 minutes earlier than usual, and use that time to show up to the writer's desk. No expectations, no pressure. As your body adapts, move the clock back gradually until you reach a wake time that gives you quiet, focused mornings without causing stress in other areas of your life. This isn't about suffering. It's about building a schedule that makes writing inevitable. Step 2. Utilize free time. Another underutilized asset is the small pockets of free time scattered throughout your day. Many authors have written entire books using nothing more than lunch breaks and short gaps between obligations. 10 minutes between meetings is enough to sketch a scene or write a few lines of dialogue. I work in IT, which usually means I have a computer nearby. There are often moments when a long process is running on a server and suddenly I'm just waiting around for 20 minutes. Instead of reaching for distractions, I open my writing project and I work. This isn't always possible, you won't always have a computer available, and that's where portability matters. A notebook in your pocket is enough. Writing doesn't always mean drafting chapters. Thinking through your story, noting down interesting turns of phrase you overhear, or capturing a poem when something you see sparks an idea, all counts. And over time, these small efforts compound. You may or may not make dramatic progress on a manuscript this way, but that's not the point. The real value is keeping your mind primed for writing. So when you do sit down for a longer session, you're already in motion, not starting cold. In reality, the first 2 steps are all you need to get started. But once you begin integrating writing into your daily life, a new problem appears. Ideas start arriving faster than you can act on them. This is where my crop rotation method comes in. It's inspired by Brandon Sanderson's approach to managing multiple projects. He works on one book for a set period, then, before boredom or burnout sets in, he switches to a different project. That gives his mind rest from one story while still making forward progress on another. Crucially, those projects are meaningfully different. When Sanderson steps away from the Stormlight archive, for example, he often switches to a YA novel. The change in tone, audience, and constraints refreshes his creative energy. I've adapted this concept into a more structured system. I work in either 1 week or 3 week blocks, depending on whether I want to draft a short story or a novel. After 3 or 4 weeks of focused writing, I schedule a deliberate rest week, during which I'm allowed to do anything creatively, including nothing at all. Since I started clearly marking which weeks belong to which projects and honoring those rest periods, both my productivity and my focus have increased dramatically. An optional but powerful addition is tracking your output during these rotations. Daily and weekly word counts, along with brief process journaling. This is a large topic and deserves its own video, but the short version is this. Collecting that data has given me empirical insight into my growth as a writer. It allows me to realistically estimate timelines, something that's no longer an option for me now that I have multiple works in progress funded and pre-ordered through Kickstarter. That's it. These are the 3 changes you need to begin living like a writer in the new year. Now, there's only one thing left to do. Write! For the next week, and ideally for the next few months, practice waking up early and using whatever free time you have to put words on the page. What you write doesn't matter. Stories, poems, journal entries, personal essays, just write something. I do not recommend starting a book yet, especially not a series. If you do take on a longer project, do it with the understanding that you won't be satisfied with the work once your skills improve. That's normal. My current crop rotation project is rewriting for the second time the first book I ever wrote. So, if that tells you anything. Next week, we move on to the second discipline, learning how to read. I'll show you how to read critically, how to claim ownership over what you learn, and I'll recommend essential books on craft, fantasy classics, essential modern fantasies, and nonfiction that will deepen your understanding of the genre. Until then, keep waking up early and keep writing.